Morning, everybody. Want to start this hour? Fox News alert now. Dueling rallies downtown Chicago amid the Jussie Smollett fallout. The first one kicking off this hour. Jesse Jackson is leading it, supporting the prosecutor's decision to drop charges. Meanwhile, about an hour from now, Chicago police will hold their own rally protesting against the prosecutor. Get a live report. Matt Finn's working that story again for us today in a moment. Meanwhile, Fox News alert on a Me Too era controversy for former Vice President Joe Biden as he goes on the defensive now. Good morning, everybody. I hope you had a great weekend. A brand new week begins right now. I'm Bill Hemmer live here in New York. How you doing?
You didn't get the memo. We're actually done. There's only 2 hours this.
Yeah.
No, April Fool's. Sorry.
Right.
Hour 3.
Intelligence Committee.
Comparison for Sandra Smith. Well, Biden leading among Democratic candidates in polls, despite not officially being in the race yet. And now he's responding to accusations from a former Nevada State Assemblywoman. She claims she felt violated after an encounter at a 2014 campaign rally.
This is about context and understanding that there's a very, very powerful man, that he is the second most powerful man in the United States at the time. And I was a candidate, and I was not expecting him to touch me in that kind of an intimate way and to kiss me. And regardless of what his motivation was, there was no personal relationship there.
Peter Ducey is live in Washington. Peter?
Julie, Joe Biden is not saying sorry for having a style that involves a lot of touching. Instead, the former vice president tells us in a statement this: "In my many years on the campaign trail and in public life, I have offered countless handshakes, hugs, expressions of affection, support, and comfort. And not once, never, did I believe I acted inappropriately. If it is suggested I did so, I will listen respectfully, but it was never my intention." While the former vice president is saying that, current White House officials are telling Joe Biden that times have changed.
I think Joe Biden has a big problem here because he calls it affection and handshakes. His party calls it completely inappropriate.
Not everybody agrees. Stephanie Carter, who was famously photographed having her shoulders held by Biden while her husband, Ash Carter, was sworn in as defense secretary, says this now about Lucy Flores. Quote, "Let me state up front that I don't know her, but I absolutely support her right to speak her truth, and she should be like all women believe. But her story is not mine. The Joe Biden in my picture is a close friend helping someone get through a big day for which I will always be grateful." Joe Biden still hasn't announced his candidacy for president, and now his potential competitors are taking his accusers' side.
Do you think it disqualifies him for the presidency?
Yeah. He's going to decide whether he's going to run or not, and then the American people, if he does, will decide, whether they support him or not.
I have no reason not to believe Lucy, and I think what this speaks to is the need to fundamentally change the culture of this country.
I believe Lucy Flores, and Joe Biden needs to give an answer.
8 Democratic presidential candidates will be addressing the We the People summit here in Washington, D.C. today, so we should know later on this morning how big an issue they all want to make the accusations against Joe Biden. Julie?
All right, Peter Ducey in Washington. Thank you, Bill.
Want to bring in Bill McGurn now from the Wall Street Journal, Fox News contributor here in New York. And Bill, nice to see you.
Good to see you.
What do you think Joe Biden does here?
Well, look, it's a very bad time for him for this to be coming out because he looks like he's on the verge of announcing he's going to run for president. So he's obviously going to have to push that off. And I think they're waiting to see if other women are going to come forward.
Here is an RC, Real Clear Politics average now about the 2020 presidential candidates. And Joe Biden clocks in very well.
Right.
He's at almost 30% compared to Bernie at about 22%.
The problem is he has to live by the rules of the modern Democratic Party, and one of those rules is believe the women. And also, the other problem that Joe Biden has is whether or not what he did was appropriate. There are all these pictures of him with his arms on women and so forth. So it's just I think going to be an awkward question for him.
AP writes this now, quote, "Biden has been warned by advisors that his past statements and actions, including his long history of hugging and showing affection to women," to your point, would face fresh scrutiny in a 2020 campaign. Even before Flores made her allegations, some Democrats were wondering whether Biden was meant for this moment, end quote. How does that moment look now?
Well, I think there's a cloud over it. She's been quite forceful of this. Mrs. Carter, the wife of the former defense secretary, has said that, you know, that the photo of herself with Joe Biden wasn't like this, but because one person says this incident didn't happen or didn't happen the way it's being portrayed, it doesn't mean that's true of all the other incidents. I think this is a problem Democrats have, in some senses, at least on paper. Joe Biden would be one of the most formidable opponents to Donald Trump, but I think you're going to see this kind of identity politics and the Me Too movement come back, and it's just going to be it's unclear to me how many can survive that. I believe Bernie Sanders has questions about his campaign team as well. So is there anyone that's going to be unscathed?
Here is the reference that you made. Stephanie Carter was the swearing in of her husband, Ash Carter, as defense secretary. The image, she went online over the weekend. And said that the picture was extracted from what was a longer moment between close friends, and defended their relationship with the Bidens.
Right. I mean, that's the question, right? Is this kind of touching welcome, or is it unwelcome? Is it between friends or not between friends? And I think he's just going to there's so many photos of him. I just think in the modern Democratic Party, he's going to have a hard time. Look, they're asking questions now, also tethered to this, about did he treat Anita Hill the way she should have been treated? This is where the Democrats
He was making an
are
address
today.
about that last week. Last point on this. It is still fresh and new, I believe, the accusation itself. I think a lot of people just really learned about it over the weekend, clearly, and Lucy Flores went on CNN, and I think she did MSNBC as well. Do you think in 2019 that this is a rhetorical kill shot, or is it too early to say that for somebody like...
Well, we'll see. Look, it is new in the sense that this woman's come forward and made a statement. It's not new in the sense there have always been these kind of rumors about creepy Joe Biden, and you could find a lot of pictures of him hugging women or touching them in ways that, you know, may have been appropriate if they were fine with it, and may not be. So it's not new. It builds on kind of an image that's been there before. I don't think he answered the question, you know, when it was put to him very well. He's going to have to come up. He's either going to have to say what she says is not true, or he's going to have to apologize, and he's apologized for a bunch of things.
The statement he put out over the weekend was insufficient, is that?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's going to I don't think it's going to satisfy people like the woman who made the charge, right? And then we'll see if there are other women. All I know is if you're the front runner in the polls for the Democratic presidential nomination and you're about to make your announcement that you're running, these are not the stories. They don't want people asking these kind of questions on TV. It's a distraction, right?
Nice to see you, Bill. From the Wall Street Journal, Bill McGurn, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Julie, what's next?
Another alert now in Chicago, where Jesse Jackson is leading a rally supporting prosecutors' decision to drop charges against actor Jussie Smollett. Meanwhile, in less than an hour, the Chicago Police Union will be holding its own protest, and they are very critical of how this case was handled. Matt Finn is in Chicago right now near the United Methodist Church, where Jesse Jackson is holding his event. Hey, Matt.
Hi, Julie. That rally in support of Kim Foxx is likely going to kick off any minute inside of the United Methodist Church. Jesse Jackson is inside there. He just released a statement to the press saying that these attacks on Kim Foxx are, quote, politically motivated, and that he calls her a progressive prosecutor who did the legal and right thing. We're told there will be a quick service inside the church, and then demonstrators and supporters are going to walk outside here to the center of the Loop, which is the same exact location where the Chicago Police Union is about to protest Kim Foxx. Her office is right here. This union has some 15,000 members. They're going to protest Foxx for the way she handled the Smollett case and also what they call a history of being anti-police. Kim Foxx has been heavily criticized nationwide for suddenly dropping the charges against Jussie Smollett. The president has called for a federal review. Now Justice Sheila O'Brien, a former Illinois appellate court judge, says she will personally petition the courts to assign a special prosecutor to investigate this case. Kim Foxx is responding to all of this criticism and is also changing her explanation. Last week on camera, Fox said she thought that they could have got a conviction against Smollett. Now she wrote in a Chicago Tribune op-ed that she's not so sure. She also wrote in part, quote, "Since it seems politically expedient right now to question my motives and action, and those of my office, let me state publicly and clearly that I welcome an outside, non-political review of how we handle this matter." Chicago Police Union fired right back, saying, quote, "A grand jury returned a 16-count indictment. It is Mrs. Fox's duty to prosecute this crime. She refused to do so. So this is not the first time we have alleged misconduct against Ms. Fox." The police union went on to write that Fox recently vacated a conviction against a member of the Spanish Cobra gang as well. Julie.
Ben, thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. So-called American ISIS bride is begging to come home. Now, in her first interview, she shares her side of the story with Fox News and the legal battle she has in front of her. We'll talk to the mother of James Foley, a journalist kidnapped and murdered by ISIS 5 years ago. We'll get her reaction to the fall of the caliphate there in Syria.
Plus, the battle over Obamacare, it is heating up. The president betting on the courts to come through on his campaign promise, but several top Republican lawmakers may not be on board.
By the way, the Democrats are post-Obamacare also. President Obama last fall said he likes Medicare for all. If the Democrats actually liked Obamacare, they'd all be running on Obamacare.
Dermatologist about Cosentix.
Breaking news this morning, the House Judiciary Committee is planning to vote to authorize subpoenas to obtain the full Mueller report, in addition to information from 5 former Trump White House staffers. Let's bring in Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. You know, it's amazing how much we've talked about this when, you know, we've heard from Barr's statement, but nobody's actually read this thing. Right. And already people are up in arms. We need to see it. We know that there was no collusion. We know that much. But this thing is almost 400 pages long. This subpoena, do you believe it should be released without redactions?
Well, there probably is some evidence in the Barr report, some evidence of conspiracy and some evidence of obstruction, just not enough to meet the standard of proof of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Right. Prosecutors are not allowed to bring cases that they don't think they can prove, that they can meet that standard. If there were no evidence of conspiracy and no evidence of obstruction, the Attorney General would have told us in his letter. So what does the House Judiciary Committee want? They want two things. They want the report unredacted so they can see everything in there that Mueller and company unearthed that they gave to the Attorney General, and they want the underlying documents on which the report is based. The underlying documents are in the millions. Right. We know that. Can they get everything that's in the report? Well, the Attorney General is not allowed to give them everything in the report, because the basic rule of thumb, rules of criminal procedure say if the government has evidence of guilt of someone who's not being prosecuted, they can't release it.
Evidence or no evidence, though, we still know nothing. I mean, we do not know what's in the report.
Here's what will happen.
I've never talked so much about something we know nothing about.
Well, it's very interesting, and it's frustrating. The report will be released redacted, meaning there'll be page after page after page blacked out. The House Judiciary Committee will say, not good enough for us. The Attorney General will say, I can't comply with your subpoena because the court rules prohibit me from doing so. They will bring this case to the Chief Judge for the United States District Court in the District of Columbia, and she will have to decide. Now, in the past, when it's been between Congress and the DOJ, the courts have sided with Congress. I don't know which way this is going to go. The president has said he doesn't care. It's almost
so now none of us have seen this. The president has seen it.
I don't think the president's seen it yet.
You don't think the president has seen it?
No, according to Bill Barr and Rudy Giuliani, the president hasn't seen it.
But yet he feels confident enough to say, put it all out there.
Right. That may
without
be,
redactions.
That may be.
He is very confident about that.
Yes, he is.
But you still don't think he's seen it.
We've heard him say that. I don't think he's seen it. I think he's confident.
Well, somebody has seen it and told him nothing to worry about.
It could very well be that.
Yeah.
But if he has said that and meant it, that may very well be enough to tip the scales in favor of transparency as opposed to secrecy, because he's not claiming secrecy.
Listen, he's the one that wanted to come out and talk to Robert Mueller. His lawyers were the ones that said, no, you're not doing that.
They did the right thing.
But still, you're right. No, he shouldn't have nothing to hide. It's out there. And he was right, and he's been proven right.
So the Judiciary Committee wants to be able to second guess Bob Mueller and Bill Barr as to whether the quality of evidence does reach the level of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And they want to be able to do that by looking at not only the 400-some-odd page report, but the documents on which it is based.
Okay, well, here's Alan Dershowitz on America's Newsroom in our 9 o'clock hour, which seems about 12 hours ago, on why the full report should not be released. Listen.
This report is inherently one-sided. They didn't listen to testimony from people who are favorable to the subjects. They didn't have cross-examination. And so that's why the Justice Department generally doesn't go beyond saying no indictment. That's why the world, Democrats and Republicans alike, condemned Comey when he said, I'm not going to indict Hillary Clinton, but she engaged in conduct that was extremely careless. Everybody said that was wrong. Why is this different?
Do you agree?
Yes. If the Attorney General were to release this on his own, he would be violating that same Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 6E. You're going to hear a lot about 6E in the next couple of weeks, that Jim Comey violated when he said, we're not indicting Mrs. Clinton, but by the way, here's the evidence we have against her. As for whether or not anybody testified favorably to the president before the grand jury, we don't know, and we won't know until we see what's in the report.
I want to switch gears now. Obamacare.
Sure.
Okay. There are GOP concerns about what happens if Obamacare is struck down. How big of a problem is this politically for Republicans?
Politically, for the Republicans, it's an enormous problem. Whatever you think of Obamacare, I happen to think it's unconstitutional. Forcing people to purchase a product, in my opinion, is beyond the constitutional authority that Congress has. The court got around that by saying, well, we're taxing them. So Congress can't order me to wear a red striped tie, but they can tax me if I don't. That's the theory under which Obamacare was upheld. The tax laws were changed under the Trump administration to remove the ability of the IRS to tax you for failure to get health insurance.
Right.
That's the hook on which this federal judge in Texas hung his hat for finding it unconstitutional. But if the unconstitutionality of it is upheld, what are the Republicans going to replace it with? You have 21 million people in the United States receiving government-subsidized health insurance as a result of Obamacare. You're going to take that away from them? It'll be politically catastrophic, even though I don't think it should have come in the first place.
I want to show you the president's latest tweet on Obamacare. The cost of Obamacare is far too high for our great citizens. The deductibles, in many cases, way over $7,000, make it almost worthless or unusable. Good things are going to happen. And then he tags Senator Rick Scott, Senate Majority Leader, Senator John Barrasso, Senator Bill Cassidy. There is nothing affordable about the Affordable Care Act. Let's be clear.
Well, I agree with you on that. Senators Barrasso and Cassidy are physicians, which is one of the reasons he has mentioned them. But look, if this involves letting the states regulate and letting the free market regulate, which is what I think should be done and what the president said he would like to do during the campaign, the House Democrats are never going to go for it. So here's what a lot of Republicans are hoping, that the Trump administration loses this court battle and the statute is upheld because they don't have anything in place to replace it, and they can't physically get something done between now and the 2020 campaign.
Judge Andrew Napolitano, great to have you in, and I like your red and blue tie. I'm glad you're not getting
which I chose freely.
I think that's actually purple, but whatever. Bill, I'll hand it to you.
Thank you, guys. 21 past now, a week after facing a federal judge in New York. Michael Avenatti is back in court today, this time in California. Details on the charges he is facing in that state. Plus, Homeland Security Secretary issuing a new order to border agents trying to deal with the crisis at the border as the president threatens to close it altogether.
It sends the right message. It lets Mexico.
Migrant protection protocols. That's where people claiming asylum are returned to Mexico to await adjudication. DHS is directing CBP to return hundreds of additional migrants per day above their current rates. Now, Democrats continue to resist the president's call to build a border wall. At the same time, Mexico is not doing a whole lot to stop these caravans from coming through their country toward the U.S. border. The president tweeting his frustration on both those fronts this morning, saying, quote, the Democrats are allowing a ridiculous asylum system and major loopholes to remain as a mainstay of our immigration system. Mexico is likewise doing nothing, a very bad combination for our country. Homeland Security being so very nice, but not for long. Apprehensions at the border have skyrocketed. In March, CBP was on track to apprehend more than 100,000 people crossing the border illegally. In a single day, there were more than 4,000 people who were apprehended. Lindsey Graham, who has long pushed for immigration reform, says he fully understands the president's threat to close the border. Listen here.
Well, I mean, what are we supposed to do? You have the Mexican government allowing thousands of people to walk all across Mexico. They provide them buses. They drop them off at the border, and they say, here, United States, deal with this problem.
The president is cutting off foreign aid to Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador because he says the governments there are not doing enough to keep people from fleeing their home countries. Democrats are vowing they are going to fight that and any attempt to close the border. Listen here.
When the president says he's going to close the border, that is a totally unrealistic boast on his part. What we need to do is focus on what's happening in Central America, where 3 countries are dissembling before our eyes and people are desperately coming to the United States. The president's cutting off aid to these countries will not solve that problem.
Now, Bill, there is a little bit of movement, I am told, in just the last few minutes. Mexico is taking steps to rejigger, if you will, its transit visa system. People who do not have papers to get to the United States will be turned around in that narrow part of southern Mexico and sent back to their home countries. I'm also told about this border closing idea, Bill. The president is very, very serious about this. Now, Mexico could avoid it because if it took some significant actions, the president might be willing to deal, but he is willing to suffer the consequences because he says we've got to do something about this immigration problem. Bill?
Thank you, John. A lot to get to throughout the day. I know you will. Thank you, John Roberts from the White House. Julie.
The so-called ISIS bride now speaking to Fox News as she fights to return to the U.S. and face prosecution here. Why she says she joined the terror group in the first place. Plus, James Foley, a U.S. journalist, became the first American beheaded by ISIS. His mother, Diane. Fox News alert on the so-called American ISIS bride, now at the center of a legal fight to come back to the U.S. She is sharing her side of the story with Fox. Our team tracked down and interviewed Hoda Muthana at a refugee camp in northern Syria. And Benjamin Hall is live in our London bureau with more on this interesting, fascinating interview. Hey, Benjamin.
Yeah, hi, Julie. And in fact, Hoda Muthana spoke to us quite openly. She said longingly how much she wished she could go back to the U.S., to that college lifestyle she had in Alabama. And she also insisted that she did not turn her back on ISIS just because the caliphate had fallen. Well, we tracked her down recently in northern Syria. Take a look.
You turned your back on America. Why? You've got to do better than that. You've got to explain why you made this decision.
But there was nothing except no comment, and always that laughter and a plea to go home.
I just want to go back home, really. I want my son to see my family. I want him to be safe. I'm still in Syria. It's not safe, no matter what my government tells me.
The reason she joined? The Quran told her to do so. Told her she would burn in hell if she didn't.
I didn't hate America. I didn't hate anything. I just thought it was a good story.
She's now in the camp with her 19-month-old child born from her third ISIS husband. During her 5 years with the terror group, she called repeatedly on Americans to die, saying in one tweet, "Wake up, go on drive-bys, spill their blood, rent a big truck and drive all over them, kill them." She claims she was radicalized online, and during her 5 years, she barely left the house to see the crimes that were committed. Her citizenship was revoked because her father was a diplomat at the time of her birth, and that disqualifies her. She thinks she's going back to the US soon. President Trump has labeled her a terrorist and says she's not welcome. Julie?
All right, thank you very much.
More on this now with Diane Foley, whose son James was the first American killed by ISIS. That was 2014. James was abducted while working as a journalist covering the Syrian war, and she has since founded the James Foley Foundation and joins me live in Washington today. And good morning to you. It's great to see you.
Good to see you.
How you doing?
Fine. I'm fine. Thank you.
Well, you look good and you look strong. Well, thank you for being here today. I want to get to the awards ceremony that happens a little later. But what do you think about this woman's claim about she wants the right to have her case heard before an American judge? Do you think she deserves that?
I do think it's very important that we hold anyone associated with ISIS or any terrorists accountable for their decisions. She was young. You know, I think You know, I have to leave the particulars to our Secretary of State and government. But I do feel that we must do our part to take on some of these difficult cases and try them and hold them accountable for the choices they made. An example is Cody and Al-Sheikh, those British jihadists. It's been over a year that they've been held in northern Syria, and we need them brought to justice, too.
You've been reading the reports about the fall of the physical caliphate. This was, I mean, you think about your son in the very early days when he was there, and now 5 years later, it has been destroyed. What do you think of that at the moment?
Well, I'm certainly grateful that that physical presence has been shrunk. However, the leadership is still at large. I fear that the sleeper cells are all around us, and there are hundreds of ISIS fighters in this tenuous custody in northern Syria. And I'm hoping that our country will take on the leadership of holding these folks accountable, be it through an international tribunal, be it through individual countries taking back their citizens and holding them trial, holding them accountable. But it must be addressed, because otherwise they will infiltrate our countries and continue their reign of terror.
It's a very interesting point. When you think about Southeast Asia and the Philippines or Indonesia, think about the continent of Africa. It is spreading, as you well know. What do you think is the best way to counter this?
I really believe we can't stop it unless we hold them accountable by bringing them to trial, showing them how a real justice system works, and prosecuting them, putting them away for the rest of their life so that they can pay for their crimes against humanity. If we let them go or hold them in these tenuous situations, no justice is served, and they just perpetuate their agenda.
Yeah. It's a big battle, as you well know. Tell me about the Freedom Awards, the James Foley Freedom Awards.
Well, Jim's legacy, I pray, is to bring Americans home. We must have the backs of our brave Americans who go out in the world, be they as aid workers, educators, journalists. We must have their backs should they be kidnapped or unjustly detained. Unfortunately, there are thousands of Americans who desperately need our help. So I'm grateful for this Trump administration for taking on that issue. It's very complicated. There's nothing simple about it. But I applaud their efforts, and the James Foley Legacy Foundation will now have a full-time director here in Washington to collaborate with our Fusion Cell, our presidential envoy, to bring our Americans home, to make this a national priority. That's my hope.
National Press Club, Tuesday night, 6 o'clock in Washington, D.C. Congratulations.
All are welcome. Thank you.
And keep your strength. I think your son would be very proud to be watching you today. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Bill.
South Carolina police are saying it was apparently a deadly mistake that led to the kidnapping and murder of a college student last seen here getting into a black Chevy Impala. Police say she got into the wrong car, thinking it was her Uber. Jonathan Seri is live in Atlanta. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Julie. Police are still investigating the motive, but this very sad story at this point. They believe they ordered an Uber in downtown Columbia, but got into a different car by mistake. Investigators say the car's child safety locks were engaged to prevent her escape. Police say a group of turkey hunters discovered Samantha's body in a remote area of Clarendon County, about 65 miles east of where she disappeared. Back in Columbia, authorities spotted the suspect's car and pulled him over.
The officer approached, asked the driver to step out of the car, and the driver fled on foot. Officer gave chase, was able to make an apprehension after a short foot chase. When they returned back to the car, further examination determined that there was what appeared to be blood present in the car.
24-year-old Nathaniel David Rowland is charged with murder and kidnapping. When he appeared before a judge, the victim's mother was allowed to read a prepared statement saying, "It sickens us to think that his face was the last thing that my baby girl saw on this earth." Friends described Samantha Josephson as bubbly, sweet, intelligent, and had dreams of becoming a lawyer. The victim's family flew in from New Jersey to attend a memorial vigil, which was attended by nearly 1,000 people. Samantha's father said he wants to make it his life's mission to educate people on how to be safe when using rideshare services.
You guys have to travel together. At night, Samantha was by herself. She had absolutely no chance. If there's somebody else in the car, there's actually a chance.
Let me show you something. When you hail a vehicle on a rideshare service, it's the license tag, the make and model of the vehicle, also the driver's. When you hail a vehicle on a rideshare service, it's the license tag, the make and model of the vehicle, also the driver's. Julie?
Right. Jonathan Seri, also check the license plate, because they always give you the license plate on the car, and you always want to make sure that you have the same license plate as your Uber app tells you, or other service. All right, Jonathan Seri, thank you very much.
So the charges have been dismissed. The fight, though, over the decision to drop the case against Jussie Smollett heating up yet again today. There are dueling rallies today in Chicago, one in support of the state, another in support of the police. They clearly have a different opinion on this decision. We'll explain.
The Smollett case today. Prosecutors dropping all charges, as you know, prompting dueling rallies today in Chicago, set to begin any second. One in support of the prosecution, then another by the police union against it. That rally coming up in about 15 minutes. Let's bring in Daniel Linsky, the former Boston Superintendent-in-Chief of Police, Incident Commander for the Boston Marathon bombing, and Managing Director for Kroll, or K-Roll. Is that right?
Kroll.
All right, it's Kroll. All right, so let me just first ask you, if this had happened under your watch and you have conducted and gathered a mountain of evidence against a case such as this one, and then the state attorney goes and throws it out, what does this say to you and your police department?
It says that we need to develop a better, effective line of communication, because if we're not talking and working together, community policing doesn't happen. If community policing doesn't happen, crime and violence will not be impacted in any effective manner. I've disagreed with prosecutors. We've had yelling, screaming arguments. It happens. But the fact that they weren't even involved in the process, that they found out about it secretly, shows that there was the tensions were to that point where they weren't working together. They need. Smollett's happened. Unfortunately, it's over. They need to figure out how they're going to communicate effectively going forward. The past is the past, but crime is still going on. Violence is still going on in Chicago. We need to have both the police, the community, and the prosecutor's office working, at least having conversations. We might disagree on how we change the justice system to make it more fair, to deal with those disparate impacts, but we all agree we need to be working together to do it. And I would hope that the sides need to come together and have that conversation. But I understand the frustration of the officers that are out there making these cases and putting their lives on the line every day.
There's dueling rallies today. So some are protesting against the decision to drop the charges. Others, like Jesse Jackson, they are basically protesting in defense of Kim Foxx. And Jesse Jackson is essentially saying that she did the right thing, and that, you know, he defends her actions in dropping the charges. We just got in new sound from him, a quick interview with Jesse Jackson there at the location where they're planning their protest. Let's roll it.
Since you took office in December, there have been some notable accomplishments. We revamped the Office of Conviction Integrity Unit, resulting in overturned convictions in over 60 cases, including the first ever mass exoneration in Cook County, 15 men whose convictions stem from misconduct by a police officer. There's been a lead in bond reform, instructing prosecutors to agree to recognize bonds where appropriate.
So basically he's saying that other cases similar to this one have been thrown out. Let me point out, this is a class 4 felony, which also falls under the same category as if somebody, let's say in school, pulls a prank and pulls the fire alarm. Very different crimes here.
Sure.
Do you believe that this crime deserved to be thrown out? Just point blank.
After the indictments are over and they've done this, it shouldn't have been thrown out. It should have been mitigated, but with input from the Chicago Police Department. The problem here is there was no conversation, and it was done in such a way that I think her intentions were right, to try and take care of the case. And her goal, I think, is to make a better police department, better community response. But the manner in which it happened, where the police were not included in that decision, further made the divide. It didn't bring it closer together.
All right, Daniel Linsky, thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Bill.
Coming up next, quick preview with Melissa. How you doing on a Monday? Good
Hey,
afternoon.
Bill. A Nevada Democrat coming forward saying former VP Joe Biden inappropriately kissed her at an event several years ago. She says she did not feel sexually harassed, but that it's important that voters know about it. Biden denies any wrongdoing, but says he is willing to listen what it all means as 2020 approaches and he mulls a bid there. And the White House says the president is not bluffing when he says he will close our southern border if the flood of migrants does not stop. Democrats slamming the idea, and Homeland Security trying to rush more personnel to the border to deal with the crisis. We debate it. Plus our hashtag one lucky guy outnumbered. Top of the hour, Bill.
See you then. Thanks, Melissa. Brand new week starts in 10 minutes. Thanks. Michael Avenatti's back in court in a different state, facing charges of fraud.